The tides of history shifted violently when the Normandy landings failed, leaving the beaches stained red. With the Atlantic Wall holding firm, the Allied forces retreated in a desperate, disorganized, and bloody, shattered withdrawal that signaled the beginning of a dark, irreversible collapse across the entire Western Front. Simultaneously, the Eastern Front crumbled under the weight of German strategic superiority and relentless, crushing pressure. Berlin secured a decisive, absolute victory, effectively redrawing the map of Europe with iron and fire. Independent nations were systematically dismantled, replaced by a highly centralized, cold, and unforgiving totalitarian hegemony. Under this new, suffocating order, political pluralism vanished, replaced by the singular, crushing weight of state. State control permeated every facet of media, institutional life, and the private thoughts of every citizen. The continent transformed into a rigid monolith, governed by a single, terrifying ideology that demanded absolute conformity through constant, brutal coercion and the swift, merciless suppression of any hint of internal dissent. While technological advancements in aviation and rocketry accelerated under the state's cold, calculated, and strategic direction, the human cost of this rapid progress was catastrophic, leaving deep, permanent scars upon the landscape. Policies of systemic persecution and institutionalized discrimination became the standard, enforced with chilling, mechanical, and efficiency. A dark, unified European landscape emerged, standing in stark contrast to the democratic values that once promised a different, brighter, post-war era for the millions who now lived under the regime's shadow. This grim, monolithic future stretched across the horizon, silencing the voices of those who dared dream of a world where liberty and individual rights were not considered dangerous, subversive, or entirely expendable. The architecture of the cities changed, reflecting the regime's obsession with power, scale, and total dominance. Massive, concrete monoliths rose above the ruins of old capitals, casting long shadows over the streets. Citizens walked with heads bowed, their eyes avoiding the watchful gaze of the ubiquitous state security. Every radio broadcast echoed the same hollow slogans, reinforcing the state's narrative of eternal, glorious victory. Books were burned, history was rewritten, and the collective memory of the people was slowly erased. The vibrant diversity of European culture was flattened into a singular, gray, and obedient national identity. Scientists worked in secret, windowless bunkers, developing weapons that could reach across the vast, dark oceans. Their genius was shackled to the regime's ambitions, turning human ingenuity into a tool for oppression. The skies were filled with the roar of jet engines, a constant reminder of the state's reach. In the countryside, the fields were silent, worked by those who had lost everything to the insatiable hunger of the war machine that now consumed the continent's resources with cold, calculated precision. There was no room for debate, no space for art that did not serve the state. The very concept of a private life had been abolished, replaced by the duty to serve. The regime viewed humanity as a resource to be managed, optimized, and discarded when no longer useful to the grand, overarching design of a world ruled by the iron fist of Berlin. Fear became the primary currency, trading hands in the shadows of the crumbling, ancient city walls. Families were torn apart by suspicion, as children were taught to report the sins of parents. The social fabric of Europe was shredded, leaving behind a tapestry of betrayal, silence, and despair. Yet, beneath the surface of this monolithic order, a faint, flickering ember of resistance remained hidden. It was a dangerous, fragile thing, kept alive by those who remembered the taste of freedom. They whispered in the dark, sharing forbidden words that reminded them of a world long lost, the state hunting them with relentless fervor, using every technological advantage to track their every move. But the human spirit, however suppressed, proved difficult to extinguish entirely, even under such conditions. The regime's victory was total, yet it remained haunted by the ghosts of the old world. The map was redrawn, but the hearts of the people remained unconquered, waiting for a spark. The future was a dark, monolithic void, stretching out into an eternity of state-mandated cold order. It was a world where progress was measured by the reach of rockets and the efficiency of the secret police, rather than the flourishing of human potential or the growth of liberty. The tragedy was not just in the loss of life, but in the loss of the very soul of a continent that had once been the cradle of modern democratic political thought. Now, it was a graveyard of ideals, a monument to the dangers of absolute, unchecked power. The shadow of tyranny had fallen, and it seemed as though the sun would never rise. Again on a Europe that was free, diverse, and capable of dreaming of a better future. The regime stood tall, a fortress of steel and concrete, looking out over a broken world. Its leaders spoke of a 1,000-year reign, their voices booming from speakers in every town square. But the foundations were built on the shifting sands of fear, and the cracks were forming. The weight of the system was becoming too much to bear, even for the most loyal. Economic stagnation began to creep into the heart of the empire, despite the state's best efforts. The cost of maintaining such absolute control was draining the lifeblood of the nation, slowly, surely. The future remained uncertain, a dark, monolithic path leading toward an inevitable, and perhaps violent, reckoning. The stage was set for a grim, monolithic future, where the shadow of the past loomed, large over the present, threatening to consume the very possibility of a different, more humane tomorrow, leaving only the cold, hard reality of a world defined by the iron rule. As the dust settles on a conquered Europe, the global landscape transforms into a tense, bipolar standoff. The world is now locked in a cold war between the German-dominated continent and an isolated America. This new international order is defined by a fundamental, irreconcilable clash between two radically opposing political models. While the world becomes significantly less diverse and increasingly Eurocentric, the internal pressures of the system mount. Economic stagnation begins to rot the foundations of the regime, while persistent underground resistance threatens its stability. Shadowy figures move through the ruins of bombed-out cities, whispering of a freedom that once existed here. The narrative serves as a haunting, visceral reflection on the inherent dangers of absolute and unchecked power. It forces us to confront the fragility of liberty, which can vanish when the light of democracy fades. The scenario demands a critical examination of history, questioning the very nature of our own global order. We must ask if our current systems are truly distinct from the authoritarian impulses of the past. The regime projects strength through massive, brutalist architecture that looms over the silent, fearful, and oppressed populace. Yet beneath the polished surface of state propaganda, the cracks in the monolithic structure grow ever wider. Fear is the currency of this new age, traded in dark alleys and whispered in guarded private homes. The regime's reach is absolute, extending into the minds of children and the labor of every citizen. Technology advances at a terrifying pace, yet it serves only to tighten the grip of the state. Rocketry and aviation are now tools of intimidation, casting long, metallic shadows over the captive, broken nations. The United States remains a distant, flickering beacon of hope, isolated across a vast and hostile ocean. Diplomacy has been replaced by the cold, hard stare of nuclear silos and the threat of annihilation. Every citizen knows that a single word of dissent could lead to a permanent, state-mandated disappearance. The regime maintains its control through a complex web of informants, surveillance, and the promise of violence. Yet, in the quiet corners of the continent, the embers of resistance continue to glow, refusing extinction. These brave souls trade forbidden books and clandestine radio signals, dreaming of a world without the shadow. They know the cost of their defiance is high, yet they persist in the face of certain death. The regime views these small acts of rebellion as a cancer that must be excised with extreme prejudice. State security forces patrol the streets with rhythmic, heavy boots that echo against the cold gray stone. The atmosphere is thick with the weight of history, a heavy shroud that smothers the spirit of man. We see the faces of the people, etched with the weariness of a life lived in constant fear. Their eyes reflect a hollow emptiness, a testament to the systematic erasure of their individual human identity. The state dictates the truth, rewriting the past to ensure that the future remains firmly in its grasp. History is a malleable clay, shaped by the hands of those who hold the absolute, crushing power. The regime claims to bring order, but it delivers only a sterile, lifeless, and deeply suffocating silence. Europe has become a vast, interconnected prison, where the borders are merely lines on a map of control. The contrast between the democratic dream and this reality is a chasm that cannot be easily bridged. We are reminded that progress is not merely technological, but moral, and that moral progress is easily lost. The shadow of tyranny is long, stretching across decades and generations, threatening to consume the very soul. It is a sobering reminder of how easily the course of human progress can be diverted by hate. The regime's leaders sit in their high towers, oblivious to the rot that consumes their own foundations. They believe their power is eternal, a monument to their own perceived greatness and their absolute will. But history has a way of turning, of breaking the chains that bind the spirit of the people. The resistance grows, fueled by the memory of what was lost and the hope of what remains. They wait for the moment when the regime's grip finally falters, when the cracks become a total collapse. The world watches from afar, holding its breath as the bipolar standoff reaches a critical breaking point. Will the regime fall under the weight of its own hubris, or will it endure for another century? The answer lies in the hearts of those who refuse to bow, who choose to stand for liberty. Their struggle is the heartbeat of a world that refuses to be silenced by the dark, cold order. The narrative concludes not with a resolution, but with a question that lingers in the stagnant air. Can humanity ever truly escape the shadow of its own darkest impulses and the cycle of tyranny? The future remains unwritten, a fragile possibility that hangs in the balance between light and total darkness. We look at this grim landscape and see the reflection of our own potential for both good and evil. The warning is clear, echoing through the halls of time to those who still possess the freedom. Liberty is a garden that must be tended, or it will be choked by the weeds of control. The regime's monolithic structure is a testament to the danger of allowing one ideology to rule all. We must remain vigilant, for the shadow of tyranny is never as far away as we might believe. The story ends, but the struggle for the future of humanity continues in the hearts of many. The Cold War persists, a silent, deadly game played on the stage of a broken, weary, and divided world. Every day is a battle for the truth, for the right to exist, and for the dream of freedom. The regime may hold the power of the state, but it does not hold the power of hope. Hope is the fire that burns in the dark, the light that guides the way through the night. The shadow will eventually pass, for no order built on fear can ever truly last for all time. The dawn of a new, different era waits for the moment when the people finally reclaim their own.
To be objective, even if Nazi Germany had won the war, it wouldn't be any better than the United States today, which practices Nazism professionally, but under the guise of a sham democracy. It controls the world through military force to serve its selfish interests and boundless ambitions. In conclusion, we can say that the United States and its allies are the new Nazis.